you do have a tribe, right? RuPaul talks about this tribe. And I think even if you haven't been on the show, you are part of a very large community that is global, that is not going anywhere. And use that to lift yourself and to continue to be yourself and express your art and express yourself in the way that you want. I think that's the only way really to fight this, is to just continue. Drag Race goes on, drag shows around the world go on. Reading to children in libraries should go on. There's a lot of beauty in all of that. And if it continues, hopefully we'll just continue to counter all of the negativity, and maybe, in the end, we will win.
Well, perhaps the most culturally significant moment for the LGBTQ plus community in the 21st century was on February 2nd, 2009. That was the premiere on Logo TV. Do you remember them? Well, it was the premiere of a strange new reality show that combined a drag racing theme with actual drag queens. A reality competition show that would change much of LGBTQ plus impression throughout America and across the world. And of course, it was called RuPaul's Drag Race. Today's guest is really an expert from a unique seat of the phenomenon of RuPaul, Drag Race, and the culture of drag queens in America. Maria Elena Fernandez is an award-winning journalist who was the first mainstream journalist to be allowed on set to write about the show for the Los Angeles Times. She has a new book about the experience called Don't F It Up. And of course we know she's sampling from RuPaul's famous phrase that we can say, don't fuck it up. So welcome Maria Elena Fernandez to Unapologetically Queer. We really welcome you today.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here.
Maria, first, I understand that you were invited to the first season. I'm jealous as all hell when I read this, that before anyone knew anything about RuPaul's Drag Race, you were invited to a promotional event. I've been to 1,000 of those in my life before the show launched. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And that was a big publicity event, so it wouldn't have been just the LA Times. It was basically a press conference in a hotel ballroom attended by hundreds of TV critics from across the country. But it was that day that I really fell in love just watching maybe 2 or 3 minutes of a teaser that they showed us. Just fell in love with the show. I knew that it would be something that I'd be very interested in following, and I had a feeling that it was going to be a big hit. And so at the beginning of second season, because by the time we had that event, the show had already been produced. So by the time the second season rolled around, I did get to be the first person to visit the set and watch production as it happened.
Yeah, now you're an ally to the community, I understand. Want to make sure that that's clear. You go to this press event, very likely you had heard of RuPaul, although RuPaul was well known, but still on the skirts of entertainment, not completely mainstream in America, certainly not like what we've watched in the last decade, last 12, 13 years. When you went to it, you had an early feel right off the bat that this might be a hit. It didn't seem strange to you of this combination theme of drag racing and drag queens and a reality competition show where drag queens are competing with each other in lip sync, and that just seemed completely natural to you when you went to this press event?
It was just the perfect convergence of all of the things that you love about drag. And I've been a drag fan always. I grew up in South Florida, and I used to go to the tea parties in South Beach before I moved away. And so, yes, I was very aware of who RuPaul was. RuPaul had a very quiet period for about 10 years. He had been out of the limelight, trying to find his next chapter, and found it in the world of reality TV, which in the early aughts was very hot. You know, there were this Survivor and American Idol and Project Runway and America's Top Model. And this show brilliantly borrowed all kinds of things from all of those shows to create something fresh and new. And what was really striking, even from those first few minutes that day in that press conference, was that in all of those other shows, people have to specialize in one thing, you know, singing well or sewing and designing clothes or modeling. And Drag Race, they basically have to do all of those things, and they have to do all those things really fast and really well. And I mean, who doesn't love drag? If drag doesn't make you smile, I feel like you should get checked out.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You know, one of the things that I think is super interesting, and you know, of course, the phrase has been coined out of the show. So many catchphrases have been coined out of RuPaul's Drag Race from the queens and Michelle and RuPaul. But spilling the tea is one of the things that has come out of the show. So let's do that. Let's still talk about season one. Logo's Big Gay Sketch Show famously made the joke in the show that has stuck for 15 years on season one, where they talked about it and made fun of it and played with it. And of course, the big hit joke line is, "Why are you so bright, Miss RuPaul?" And it was making fun of the production quality of the show in season one. I'm curious from your seat now, and spilling the real tea, what was your reaction after seeing the season one in terms of the production quality of reality? Because you weren't watching Survivor quality money.
Oh, no. I mean, and anyone who obviously watches TV or covers TV the way I did professionally, you know, oh, okay, so this is more low budget. This, I remember there were moments in first season where you can kind of see RuPaul tracking his steps, almost like he's trying to remember his marks or making sure he. If you rewatch it, you'll catch it now, you know. But what you're referring to is the famous Vaseline filter.
The Vaseline filter.
Which actually is not Vaseline filter. It was production's attempt to correct the lighting. They were in a very small studio space in Burbank that was very poorly lit, again, low budget. So in post-production, they tried to correct that because obviously drag queens want to look their best. And the lighting just made it look really harsh. But it appears to be Vaseline filter, and until the end of time, that's what it's going to be called, and that's what people love about season one and remember it for.
Now, here's one of the reasons that I love having this conversation with you, because the reporter in you comes out so clearly. Wait, let me technically explain exactly what happened here. And let's talk about you a moment before we get in to your book and lots of the detail of RuPaul's Drag Race. You've covered entertainment for quite a long time. For the Los Angeles Times, you worked quite extensively at Vulture, The Daily Beast, Newsweek, and NBC News for 15 years. But as you said, you had roots right here in South Florida, writing and working at the Sun Sentinel. Of course, we love the paper. Yes. I got all of that correct, right, in terms of your biography history as a reporter. I understand when you were here in South Florida at the Sun Sentinel, you even wrote about the AIDS epidemic. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your experience in doing that.
Yeah, so I grew up here. I went to the University of Miami. My first job out of school was an internship at the Sun Sentinel. When that was over, I don't know if you remember, there was a little paper in Hollywood called the Sun Tatler.
Oh, sure.
I went to work there for a few months. It was basically waiting for the Sun Sentinel to have an opening because they had expressed interest in hiring me, but I needed to wait it out. And at the Sun Tatler, I became super good friends with a reporter who died of AIDS that year. So we were friends for only 11 months, but we were really close friends. And that experience of watching him get sick really impacted me and made me want to, I had always been interested in covering health, and it made me want to specialize in that virus, which in the early 90s was extremely terrifying.
Terrible.
And there was really no way to make sense of what was going on. And all you knew was that a lot of people were going to a lot of funerals. And it was very scary. And my editor at the Sun Sentinel, once I did jump and join that newsroom, did let me start covering health and specializing. And there was this man named Drew Drake, who was an activist in Fort Lauderdale, was very well known, had AIDS, and he worked tirelessly to help anyone who didn't have resources, who didn't have money, pay for medications. And so he let me follow him around and tell his story. And that was when I really learned what all of that was about and the impact on the gay community, because I had access to all of his friends. A lot of them were HIV positive at the time. And so I spent a lot of years in that world. And at the same time, having nothing to do with AIDS coverage, I just happened to love drag. So sometimes I would go to drag shows in the Keys or in Miami Beach where I lived. And I just stayed connected to that community.
To the community. And what's interesting about that, again, as I point out to viewers, you're an ally to LGBT, and you're writing about the AIDS epidemic and what it is doing to community in the 90s for the Sun Sentinel. So you've lived here in South Florida, and you have that experience. Then you are, for an extended period of time, in Los Angeles for the LA Times, and you come across this event and begin to cover RuPaul's Drag Race. I have to ask you, in terms of getting it right out there, the experience of South Florida, the experience in Southern California, which community did you like better? And remember, I'm in South Florida.
So I made 2 quick stops in Atlanta and DC along the way too. But
okay.
I lived in LA for a very long time, and LA was basically my home as an adult, right? And I am, I'm back home, but it hasn't even been a year yet, and I'm still getting used to being back. There are things that I love about South Florida that I never stopped loving, and I love how multicultural it is. I love the energy. I love that there's a nightlife here that lasts all night. I love how it's grown and its culture. But I really do miss Los Angeles. And right now we're living in really crazy political and cold war times. Yeah. And I tend to lean more towards the California end of things. So it's very hard sometimes to be here.
I want to come back to politics in a minute. But the last question before I move out of season 1, because I'm really fascinated about this. You're at the Los Angeles Times, and they have this press event on something that really was extraordinary. At the time when you did this drag race, drag queen reality show. How did you convince an assignment editor at the LA Times to allow you to cover? And it must have been such a strange moment to go, I'm going to go to this event and talk about drag queens and competing with each other in lip sync. What was that like?
Well, covering that particular press conference, that's part of a 2 or 3 week event in LA where all of the networks put on presentations about their shows. So covering that particular press conference didn't really take much convincing, especially because it was hilarious. The way RuPaul behaved at that press conference was really wild. And so it just gave you a lot of color and interesting things to write about. So that part was not difficult. And even getting an editor interested in the show itself wasn't hard at all, because my editor at the time was a lover of drag and loved the show and even had met RuPaul before. It was surprising to both of us, though, that once I visited the set and came back with the feature story that we wanted to do, that, everybody else got on board. I mean, it was a huge Sunday cover, full page Sunday cover story. And the picture was a gigantic picture of RuPaul and Debbie Reynolds, who was a guest judge on season 2. And for that to be the Sunday, which was the prime spot in LA, the Hollywood industry wanted to be on that cover on Sunday. And for it to be a giant photograph of RuPaul and Debbie Reynolds with a huge story on this show that was, on the cusp of changing America, was a real triumph, for both me and my editor. That was a real success.
Wow, that's an awesome story.
We're talking about 2010.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And Maria, for those people that didn't get to be in that original press launch, when you say RuPaul was so out there and animated, what kinds of things did she do with that to make you
So,
say this all these years later?
so RuPaul was not in drag, which I thought was fascinating. That RuPaul came as RuPaul, and he had three contestants with him. Um, Chanel, Angina, and Bibi Sahara Benet, and they were in drag. And so there were these really tall, beautiful, gorgeous, very ornate people surrounding RuPaul on stage. And RuPaul wasn't having it. They wanted him to sit down and do a Q&A, and he wouldn't sit down. And they would ask him things like, so the clip that we just saw, it shows that you're kind of taking from Top Model, you're borrowing from one of the things they do on Top Model, and he would just snap back, "Oh, please," and he would just say these really funny jokes about, we were here first, who cares? Who cares? He has a really funny line where he's like, "Who cares where this idea came from? Maybe it came from a stall in a West Hollywood nightclub." But we're here now, like he just wasn't doing the normal thing that producers do at these press conferences. And it caught a lot of attention. It was really fun to be at. And the rest is herstory.
Yeah, her story, exactly. And your book documents these stories. Don't F it up. I'm curious, even with the history that you've had as a journalist, professional ally of the show, why did you decide to write the book?
So it actually came to me. I had written a story for Vulture in, I think it was 2017, when season 9 had finished, and they earned a whole slew of Emmy nominations. That was brand new to the show, which was a very different thing for a show, a TV show in season 9 to start getting Emmy nominations. Is really unheard of. By the time a show is in season 9, it's on its way out of television. And so I had written a story looking back, sort of like a mini version of the book. It was like looking back at these 9 seasons and how did this happen? How did this show with this Vaseline filter that nobody thought would even make it to season 2? A lot of people didn't. A lot of critics didn't. And so I had done a story kind of looking back and talking with the producers and some of the queens and RuPaul, and an agent, PJ Mark, out of New York, called me and said, I really like this story and I think it could be a book. Would you be up for it? And it took a few years to get it all figured out, but he finally got World of Wonder on board. And so it was a collaboration. They were very involved. I did all of the interviewing, I did all of the writing, but they had a say in editing the story in the end. And so it's a collaboration with the production company.
And some of the favorite stories that you tell, what do you love? Give me an example of something you just love that you told about in the book.
I mean, there's so many, if you want to go on because the book has a lot of funny moments, and it also has a lot of heart and people opening up about past pain and challenges. If you want to go the fun route, I really had a good time with the season 5 queens talking about whether Jinx was faking narcolepsy or not. That and Jinx's own admissions in that chapter are really surprising and eye-opening. I love Jinx Monsoon, and so that was just something that was really funny, where you have people like Alyssa and Roxy and Detox all debating, was she sleeping? Wasn't she sleeping? I never saw her sleep. I did see her sleep. Oh, she was, she was forcing it. She wasn't forcing it. And then you have Jinx kind of telling the truth, which was an unexpected truth. I don't want to spoil it, but it was an unexpected truth for me.
Right. Right. And how about an example of a humorous moment? Give me an example of a touching moment that you tell. That's a favorite.
So we all know the story of, Angina in season 1, huge moment, revealing that they were HIV positive. Um, but what was interesting, digging more into that, was that Angina had no plans to reveal that. There were two producers on set that knew that Angina was HIV positive because Angina had to be allowed to take medications. But there was no plan at all to use it in the show. Angina had not come out to the family as, HIV positive, had been, I think maybe at that point only diagnosed for a year or so. And then, on stage, because Angina wins that challenge, which happens to be the Mac Viva Glam, which is connected to HIV, the HIV charity, just kind of decides to let it all out and speak on it. And so hearing, not just Angina talking about what it meant to them to do that, but the producers talking about how, they were trying to hide, they were just sobbing backstage, and they didn't want that heard on camera. They didn't want the queens to hear them, just how difficult all of that was, but how proud they were of Angina. And then in the end, how that ended up being really the telltale sign that this show had something special to it. Yeah. That the show was not going to just be a show about having fun and telling funny jokes and seeing people perform on stage, but that you were actually going to go behind the scenes and see the transformation that happens internally for the artists as they become, whatever.
Maria, it's so interesting to me because you tell both sides of the same coin from the book. Don't Fuck It Up is, of course, RuPaul. It's the absolute epitome of RuPaul: mind, body, spirit, mouth, attitude. I'm curious, in terms of the labeling of the book, why did you choose that as your title? Don't F It Up. Why make the choice of all of the things that are connected with the show? Why did you choose that?
It actually was not my choice, I'll be honest. It was the choice of the production company. But I think it's exactly what you just said. I think it is. There's no way that you see that title and you don't think of RuPaul and you don't know what that means when RuPaul says that. So I think it had the perfect sounding, it had the perfect tone. You knew reading that title that you were going to have a lot of fun. You were going to hear a lot of tall tales, the people were going to spill the tea, but that it also was going to be very real.
I want to ask you, I want to take the opportunity. I have Michelle Visage's book, Diva Rules, and I want to do some compare and contrast on it. I came and did a lot of work with RuPaul's Drag Race in a different way. I came into season 3 with Alan Chuck, and became a sponsor of the show and coordinated the national and international cruise and travel program for all of the queens from RuPaul and Michelle. And recently, as you know, here in South Florida, my book, my RuPaul Diva Rules book from Michelle, is damaged because our studios got flooded from the massive flood that took place here in Fort Lauderdale in April. But it's still a cherished book. And I just want to read, because so many people have asked me to share this, of Michelle's message in Diva Rules. Michelle's message to me is, "My darling Al, since you can't afford to buy a book, here it is for free. Love and adore you from the depths of my vagina. And I'm lucky to call you my friend. I love you, truly, Michelle." Now, I send my love to Michelle and her book, Diva Rules. It's always cherished. Now that you are now an author on the RuPaul Drag Race experience, whose book is better?
Oh my God.
No, I wouldn't do that to you, Maria. Michelle will be on the phone 7 minutes later. It's a great book, and so is yours. I'm curious in terms of all of the evolution of what happened at RuPaul's Drag Race. You talk about the Emmys that start in season 9. It has become one of the most decorated reality television shows in history. How did your coverage evolve? So you're at the pre-broadcast, and then you have followed this show all the way since. How, from your eye, how has the show actually evolved, and how has its legs lasted as long as it has? How did they accomplish it from your journalistic eye?
So there's a few things. As the show grew and the budget expanded, they got better stages. They had a long list of celebrities that wanted to be judges. All of a sudden, they weren't looking for judges. Like, people just were calling in saying, we would love to be on the show. One of them was Lady Gaga, who expressed interest to RuPaul personally at an event that they were at. And Lady Gaga really helped usher that show into that new era, which is when the awards started. It happened coincidentally when MTV Networks had decided to move the show from Logo to VH1, which gave it a broader audience. And now you have VH1 plus Lady Gaga in the season premiere of season 9. And the show just blows up. And that was the year that they got all the nominations, and then they had the wins. And ever since then, they've been winning, and they have become the most decorated reality TV show in history. Yeah. And RuPaul is the most decorated reality TV show host in history. But, the show's interesting because the OG seasons, seasons 1 through 5, a lot of people have a lot of affection for those seasons, because those were the seasons where the artists had to really work at everything on their own. They had to make a lot of their own costumes. You could see that there was a lot of work and blood, sweat, and tears in their work. Now you're seeing the younger queens that are coming in the later seasons, they're social media influencers. They already come with a lot of success. They may not necessarily be performers out in the world that people know from like the club circuits or the theater venues, but people know them from social media, and they come in with millions of followers sometimes. Yeah. And they already have a lot of money, and they have beautiful costumes that have been designed for them. Yeah. That they bring into the show. So you're seeing like a different caliber. You're seeing like the change in drag, where it used to be very do-it-yourself, to now there's a whole economy of drag helping the queens. You'll talk to Raven or Raja. They'll say, now I just click, and there's a website with all the wigs, and I just order my wigs, and there's the wigs. It didn't used to be like that. Sometimes I didn't have money. I would have to make my own wig from something I found at Party City or something. I mentioned Party City. Yeah. But
I wonder if everybody knows what that reference means. It's curious to me. You mentioned Jinx, and you talked about early seasons. In your eye of watching and documenting the experience and the evolution of RuPaul's Drag Race, queens that are particular favorites of yours that you've watched that you just thought, wow, this person is any particular queens?
Oh yeah, I mean, many are my favorites for different reasons, but obviously Jinx Monsoon is a powerhouse. I love Raja. I always loved Raven. I'm a strong supporter of Raven, believer that Raven got robbed.
Raven got robbed.
Yes. But I mean, there's so many. Alyssa Edwards, Shea Coulee. I feel like I'm going to leave a lot of wonderful people. Oh my God, Adore. I love Adore Delano. Bianca Del Rio, Bob, the drag queen. I mean,
what do you think about Shangela? Shangela's had great crossover.
I love Shangela. Yes, I love Shangela. Shangela Yeah, another one that got robbed. Should have won
Yeah.
All Stars.
Yeah. Multiple. Wait, she got robbed on multiple seasons of RuPaul's
But
Drag Race.
I feel like All Stars was really the
Yeah,
one she should have
the real tough one. And I'm
won.
also curious, Maria, from your eye, your professional journalist eye, any particular season that you just said, "Wow, this is the season of seasons." Is there one that meets that standard?
Yeah. Um, I think season 5.
Yeah.
I think if you ask most people, season 5 is their favorite.
And why
Um,
for you is season 5?
I think that season 5 is the moment that you knew, oh, the show has arrived. The show knows what it is. The show can make superstars. It was a wonderful. I mean, you had Alaska, Detox, Jinx, Coco Montrese, Alyssa Edwards. I mean, back rolls, narcolepsy. You had the really really tough moment with Roxy on stage when Roxy admitted what had happened in her childhood.
Yeah.
That was another really that was a you had classic lip syncs between Alyssa and Roxy. So I think by season 4 with Sharon Needles, you had seen the show move in a different direction. Sharon Needles gave permission for a drag artist that didn't fit like the pageant bill or the comedy queen bill, who were a little bit more quirky and eccentric. That gave permission for people like Jinx, to come forth and be themselves. And so I think that season was really great. And then season 6 following it was also really great with
Yeah.
Bianca
See,
Del.
I'm so glad that you say that because I love season 5. It would be a second favorite, but favorite season is season 6. Right, exactly the opposite of what you've said. And I was sitting here thinking to myself, people in Reddit are going to watch our conversation, and there's going to be 100,000 people, and 50,000 of them are going to agree with me, and 50,000 of them are going to agree with you. And isn't that the beauty of the show?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always between 5 and 6, but that's not to say, so there were other really great moments. I mean, season 9 is one for the ages with the finale with the roses, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard to just pick pick one because there's reasons that all of the seasons kind of build on each other. But I do think that 5 was like where the show peaked and became something else.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we talked about season 5 and season 6. They've just recently announced season 16. Wow. Maria, do you feel like you're getting old? Season 16 has been announced.
Oh, I know I'm getting old.
Right. And also All Stars 9. And I knew, and I've said this repeatedly, I'm curious if you agree with this. I knew in watching All Star 7, I think, is the single greatest season of all RuPaul Drag Races. And when you consider how many seasons and how many international seasons had been done, and then you're able to achieve that in the 7th season of All Stars, it's just, that was amazing. That level of entertainment quality of a bunch of drag queens lip syncing. I marginalize what they do because it's not that, but it's just an amazing experience. Of all of the shows all over the world, do you have any particular favorites in what you've seen in the inclinations of all over the world?
Well, recently I got into Mexico. I love Valentina as a host, but I do like the UK show a lot.
Yeah, okay. And I can't let you go, Maria, without you alluded to it at the top of our conversation. I can't let you go. You're here in Florida, so you know exactly what's going on in Florida, and that's the politics. Florida, Tennessee, Texas, other states, but especially he who shall not be named, Governor Ron DeSantis. I just named him. What would you say to him. If you had the opportunity to say, you know, this is my experience with drag, RuPaul's Drag Race and drag culture, and here's my observation, and you had the opportunity to sit in front of Governor DeSantis for a few minutes, what would you tell him about what you think about drag and what he's doing to vilify drag in Florida and in America?
It's very difficult being in Florida because of that. Coming from Los Angeles, where it's just a very different experience and cultural feeling. To me, you know, what I would say to him is that to me, drag touches on the very best in people. It let, you know, you have RuPaul saying, you know, we're all born naked, the rest is drag, because there is that if you allow yourself to feel it and understand the art of drag, you get that what it is somebody allowing themselves to be themselves, someone finally giving themselves permission to be themselves in totality. And I know that sounds really heady, but what I mean is you no longer have to hide. You no longer have to be just one thing. You accept that there are many sides of you, and you have the talent and the creativity and the imagination to bring it out and share it with the world. And to me, you know, drag can make you laugh, drag can make you cry, drag is entertaining, drag really brings out in you not just whatever was painful about you, but all of the things that are beautiful about you. And to me, to try to say that hurts people, or that that's something that we should be afraid of, or that it's bad for our children, it's just ridiculous, because it's really about integrity and being honest and being your full self and allowing people to be their full self. And what you see on that show that is so magnificent is that, yeah, you're laughing with Jinx's jokes on stage, but when you hear Jinx talking about their personal journey and how they're able to become all of Jinx, which means everything that Jinx does, which means accepting that Jinx is non-binary, or that Jinx is a singer, or that Jinx is hilarious, you know, all of the different aspects of being a person are expressed in drag. And to try to minimize that or to make it seem like it's something negative or scary is wrong, and it's shameful, and I just don't really understand why we're headed in the direction that we're headed. And I feel like the book was perfectly timed, because it is a reminder of all of the beauty that there is in this community, everything that this community offers, and everything beautiful that drag adds to the world.
That's beautifully said. And your book, Don't F It Up, literally that's what happened. This spring at Queer News Tonight, we covered very closely something historic in America, as hundreds and hundreds of drag queens rode buses from all corners of Florida to the capital of Tallahassee to literally, in drag, march on the Capitol. From your standpoint, you have witnessed history as a reporter in multiple outlets, especially the Los Angeles Times. What did you think about a drag march on a state capitol, and what that says about the drag community?
Oh, I think it shows the strength, the resilience, the attitude that, you know, we're here and we're not going anywhere. It was you know, we've come a long way. Things may not be perfect, but, you know, because of the show, the world has been transformed. Like, people now go to drag con with their little kids in drag to meet their favorite drag artists. There's parents who have learned how to accept their children. You know, when you talk to people like Raja, you know, who are one of the older queens, they may not have had that in their lives. And to now have someone or some forces trying to take us back to a time where that acceptance wasn't there, That's unacceptable. So, to me, to see the march, it's beautiful. It's inspiring. It reminds you of the march on Washington in the 90s, where RuPaul performed, um, um, and really caught a lot of attention. And people were saying, we're going to have our first gay president. It's going to be RuPaul.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, because those moments are really important and special. And I hope that there's marches every week.
It's interesting to me, Maria. I don't know if you have heard, we've reported on it just this week. The influence of the show and RuPaul's Drag Race and the march on the Capitol here in Florida motivated one of the participants that participated in the march, a drag queen in Key West, who talked about how influential RuPaul's Drag Race was to her. The drag queen is Erica Rose, and she has announced that she is going to be running for the state house in representing Key West against the Republican-held two-time seat in Key West. So a drag queen, for the first time in history, is running for the State House of Representatives in Florida, and if she wins, will be the first drag queen in history to hold public office in the state of Florida. What do you think about that?
Let's get her elected. What can we do?
Exactly, right. Last thing I want to ask you about, you have this book, Don't F It Up, and how you illustrate the story of really the last 15 years of RuPaul's Drag Race. I remind everybody that Maria is a LGBTQ plus straight ally to our community, both in terms of AIDS, in terms of drag and the LGBTQ community. But Maria, as you know, many drag queens in Florida and all over the country are scared about the politics and their reactions and how they're being criminalized. Your book, Don't F It Up, and your experience of watching the RuPaul Drag Race experience in the way you have, what would you say to drag queens in terms of keeping their chin up, literally, and about the fear that they have of what they're watching? What would you say?
I mean, it's natural. I have fear too. I feel it. What is happening? You hear every day about some new change and some new scary thing that they're doing. But you do have a tribe, right? RuPaul talks about this tribe. And I think even if you haven't been on the show, you are part of a very large community that is global, that is not going anywhere. And use that to lift yourself and to continue to be yourself and express your art and express yourself in the way that you want. I think that's the only way really to fight this, is to just continue. Drag Race goes on, drag shows around the world go on. Reading to children in libraries should go on. There's a lot of beauty in all of that. And if it continues, hopefully we'll just continue to counter all of the negativity, and maybe, in the end, we will win.
Very well said. And your book, Don't F It Up, how do you recommend people get your book? What is some of the favorite ways for you to go about getting the book?
I believe Shop Queer still has some signed copies. So I would start there. If they've sold out, my favorite is the indie stores. Of course, you can find it, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I'm not going to be mad about any of that. But if you can find it at your indie store or ask your indie store to order it for you, I think that's even better.
Yeah, coming from RuPaul's Drag Race and RuPaul and 100 plus queens in RuPaul Drag Race, American history, and many more internationally, going to an indie bookshop, I'm sure everybody would cheer that embracement. Maria, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I love this because I take so many jabs at Happening Out Television Network and Hotspots Magazine, because I bring up RuPaul and RuPaul's Drag Race all of the time. And every time I do, all of my castmates and other reporters, they always make jokes about how much money RuPaul pays me to talk about RuPaul's Drag Race. And we don't do that because, just like you, we love what the platform represents. right?
Yes.
We do.
Very
Maria
much.
Elena Fernandez, thank you so much for joining us today on Unapologetically Queer.
Was my pleasure.